Hey everybody, welcome again to another video. We have our very special guest, friend of the channel, VashSky, here to discuss all things Disneyland and Disney Plus today. Dre, welcome back, buddy.
Hello there. Good to be here. Good to be on the show. Let's get to it, man. There's so much to do.
Let's get to it. It's great to have you on again, Dre. So the first topic I really wanted to dive into was the news a couple of weeks ago that the Parks, Resorts, and Experiences division of the Walt Disney Company is laying off 28,000 cast members, employees, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to kind of pick your brain on this and what's your feeling on this? Where are you at right now with these layoffs?
We knew they were coming because and Josh G. Morrow makes note of it. You can't have a full staff with only a 25 or 35% capacity limit, a restriction at your theme parks. And especially that, if one resort's closed, that's also a thing where you have to take that into account. But we knew the layoffs were coming simply because of the severe capacity limits and constraints that the Parks Consumer Products Experiences Division was experiencing. From what I understand, the occupancy rate for the Disney resorts in Florida specifically are not nearly as high as they should be. So that, obviously you just can't have that much staff and just not have the output economically to keep them on. It's just, it would not be fiscally responsible. I think that's what they were really looking at. In terms of in terms of the layoffs themselves, I think a large contingent came from Disneyland specifically, and quite obviously. But also noted too were not just cast members, but both in Ken Potrock's statement and Josh D. Morrow's statement. They said that Imagineers and executives were going to be part of that. So this, while it will disproportionately affect cast members, there will be a part of that reserved for executives and Imagineers in this current first wave of layoffs, and that will continue, as we've seen with they just canceled Frozen at the Hyperion and Making the Magical Map have laid off those cast members as well. Those entertainment cast members. So it will. This is not the end. This will keep continuing on, even beyond if Disneyland, when Disneyland opens, because it's just, you cannot have 100% cast and only 25 or 35% guest. It just, the ratio is just not correct. So they are doing what they have to do, and it's unbelievably tragic. It's horrific.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, it's like the 28,000, it's division wide, right?
Yeah.
And I made a video not too long ago about this, and I didn't blame Governor Newsom for all 28,000, because obviously that would be unfair, because he's not responsible for jobs in Florida or what have you.
No.
But I would blame him. He has a significant portion of the blame in terms of the California jobs lost.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I think that, were layoffs going to happen regardless? Absolutely. I mean, they were shut down for months. Of course, layoffs were going to happen. But I think if Disneyland Resort was able to open a month ago or 2 months ago, I think these layoffs in California would have been far less significant than they were. Maybe instead of the number that we have, maybe it would have been significantly less because of the fact that they were able to reopen and start business again. And I think that he definitely, like Josh D. Morrow said, exacerbated the situation by keeping it closed. And not only is it closed, but there's no end in sight. Like, we don't even have, like, if Gavin Newsom came out tomorrow and said, "Oh, okay, well, on December 1st we can reopen the parks," that might alleviate some of the anxiety. But we don't even have that. This is like an indefinite closure at this point, And I think he definitely made these layoffs deeper than they had to be. for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, this is why Josh Imaro included in the language, because it's very true. And a lot of people say, well, it's not, that's unfair. And, you can't lay that all on Gavin. It's like, no, you can't. At the same time, though, I mean, we don't know what those figures would look like had Disneyland been open. We just don't live in that world. So we have to assume that instead of maybe 20,000 or 22,000, maybe 15,000, it became 28,000. We have to assume that, a lot of that, a significant portion of it, came from Disneyland's closures specifically. And, for Disney's credit, in a horrible situation, they're leveraging it to try to get Disneyland open. That's why they included that language there. If they didn't, maybe you can pin it on Gavin, maybe you couldn't. But to have a public statement put out like that, whereas this is exasperated by the California situation, it really forces California to really make a move, because they're making it public. A lot of this is because of you. And so I think that was the right move to make, even though it's a horrific situation. You have to consider the fact that a stalemate had occurred.
Right.
And you have to change public perception around this. You have to get the word out. Hey, look, there are huge ramifications for these actions having been done, and to put the onus on on Gavin Newsom and the California situation specifically, I think was the right move, because without it, and now we're seeing moves in that direction because of it.
Yeah, I know. Absolutely. It's interesting because a few weeks ago, Bob Iger, who's chairman of the Walt Disney Company, was on Governor Gavin Newsom's Economic Recovery Board. And I think he's been on there, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dre, but I think he's been on there since about April. Yeah. And he resigned. Yeah. He resigned.
Yeah. I think April. Yeah.
Around April.
Just to thread on this. So.
He resigned from that position. And I think that was also kind of one of those moments that sort of put a little pressure on Gavin Newsom, because that looks really bad on him.
It does.
For Bob Iger Bob Iger is the deal maker. Okay. He's known in the industry as the deal maker. He was able to coordinate deals with Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, Fox. This guy knows how to make deals. For him to walk away from that and say, "Look, this, the talks with California are basically fruitless," says a lot.
Yes, and he's very much entrenched into the California, business economy. For example, he was a guy that was involved in the meeting with potentially moving out the Rams, the Raiders, and the Chargers out to California. He was involved in those meetings with the other 31 billionaires of the NFL to try to get them to build in a specific spot. I think he wanted them to build in Burbank or some area close to there. And he's involved. It's like, well, why is he there? It's like, well, because he is the business maker in California, so to speak. I mean, he's very in tune with the California economy. He understands, what the needs are there, and he understands the business out there. So you want him in the room. Unfortunately, the proposal that he proposed didn't go forward. There's actually a notable story where Bob Iger is talking it out with Jerry Jones, in the meeting, and apparently he was like, well, listen, you really should be listening to us a little bit, because for your economic accomplishments for the previous year, a lot of that came from us. We paid those contracts to you, or he said I paid these contracts to you, and Jerry Jones was like, that's not your money. That's Disney shareholder money that actually paid us. And it was like, whoa, Bob Iger's a millionaire having it out with a billionaire. Very funny, but he is definitely the guy. And to have somebody of such notoriety come and look, let's be honest here. He dedicated his time to do this.
Right.
He dedicated his time and his experience to be on the economic recovery task force, getting no pay, even though to have a prior CEO, now the chief executive officer for the our executive chairman, I believe that's his title, for the Disney company, to have somebody that prestigious and to have, you know, his input is invaluable when you think about it. I mean, people talk about his salary and it's like, oh, it's so high. And it's like, no, that's market rate for somebody in that position. People talk about the disparities between cast members and executives and so forth. But when you talk about the executive leadership at that level, that is how much he is worth on the market. That's why he's getting paid that rate. Right. So when he's on your economic task force, recovery task force, dedicating his time and energy and resources to whatever you want to do, that's significant. He doesn't need or necessarily have to do that. And obviously, you know, he has, there are fiscal reasons as to why you would, but he doesn't need to. And I think he just felt that his business was arbitrarily targeted. And he's like, no, if you're going to overlook an entire sector of my business just because of its unique operation, and I say that in air quotes because it's not really unique in the grand scheme of things. They've allowed zoos, museums, theaters to open, and really Disneyland is just a repository of all those things.
Right. Exactly.
If you're going to be targeted, why should I be on your economic council? And I think that's why he left.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you brought up a great point, Ray, where you said it's a repository of all those things. It really is. It's an outdoor mall. It's an indoor mall. It's theaters. Yeah. It's all those things that Governor Newsom has already said are allowed to reopen, or at least have guidelines. So what's the issue, right? Like, why is Disneyland any different? It just makes up all those other things that he's already given guidelines to or already approved to reopen. So it's kind of weird when you allow. I mean, I was at the mall yesterday here in California. Yeah. I was at an indoor mall yesterday in California. So what's the difference between that and Main Street?
There is none. There are no differences. It's completely arbitrary. There are no differences between going to a mall and Disneyland. By the way, a mall, that's all indoors. And when we know what we know about the virus, I think you're like 18 times less likely to get it outdoors than you are indoors. So, and for so much of the Disneyland operation, don't quote me on that, by the way. I think it's what the number is. It's anywhere between 8 and 18 times. Whatever. It doesn't matter. You're far likely to get it outdoors. And because of the Disneyland operation, it's mostly all outdoors. It's you know, it's one of the safest environments you can possibly be in just because so much of it is outdoors, just on the face of it. And then when you add in their mitigation strategy in Florida, I mean, it's super safe. But clearly there is a disconnect. Clearly it's like, why does Gavin Newsom believe that the Disneyland operation is any at all? I mean, just consider Knott's Berry Farm. Knott's has the Taste of Knott's going on right now. Their theme park is pretty much allowed to open universally. The only thing that you can't do is actually ride the ride next to you. But you can do pretty much everything else. You can go and you can shop indoors. You can go to the food stands, get food, and sit down and take your mask off and eat that way. As far as capacity constraints, there doesn't seem to be that many because it's pretty full in there. So it's just, okay, if Knott's is allowed to open without rides, and by the way, I go into this on my thread that I just released on my Twitter account. I go into how even the CDC has listed attractions where you can get in and put on the lap bar or any type of restraint system yourself, and not have any assistance from a theme park employee. That's a low risk. It's a low risk activity. It's the same as everybody wearing masks and being out. That's how low risk it is.
Wow.
There's no distinguishing factor whatsoever with the Disneyland operation that precludes them from opening right now. There's none. Other like I said, other industries in California are allowed to open. Why not Disneyland? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Not one.
It doesn't make any sense. I really don't understand it. And, I really wanted to bring up to you this whole thing about executive pay, because this has been an issue, I think, on the online community. I've seen a lot of publications bring this up. what are your feelings on, Disney laying people off, but they're reinstating executive pay? What are your feelings on that whole situation? Because I've been seeing a lot of people talk about this, and the media has really picked up on this as well.
I know, yeah, and I think there was like a Daily Beast article that went into it and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, how heartless that they let go all these employees, and they reinstate executive pay. Understand something, okay? This was the dirty little secret before all this happened. There is a very high. I'm trying to characterize this the best I can. It was a revolving door of executives before this happened. That the retention rate for executives in the Disney company was not nearly what you would expect. And that's because of, we call it, there's some economic terms specifically for it, but we talk about vertical ascension in the ranks, right? If and we hear this all the time with how Disney company used to run, you had George Calgaritas or something. I think he was a busboy at the Contemporary, and then he worked his way up to the company. That really doesn't exist anymore in the Disney company as you would expect it to. Really what happens is horizontal ascension. So what that means is you start out getting a degree for executive management position, and then you get accepted at one company. And then instead of moving up within that company, you get a better position or move up in another company. And then you do that, and that's how you work your way up through the industry.
Gotcha.
That's what Disney was. That's the dirty little secret. That people were joining the Disney company, making short-term decisions to make themselves look good, and then going and getting that, office at Nike or some other bigger company. And when you're going through something like this, that is simply just unacceptable. Like you can't do that. Right now, the Disney company is really in free fall, like in a controlled descent. And so you really do need executives to really be at the top of their game and making long-term decisions that will be financially and fiscally responsible for the company going forward. And what you can't have is you have to have high retention. You have to do things in a way that is not short-term, that is long-term. And you can't do that if people are thinking, man, maybe I'm going to get another job. Maybe, I'm not getting the pay that I need. Maybe I'm just going to go somewhere else. You really have to retain as much as possible. And, as horrible as this might sound, the $15 an hour cast member at Disneyland is going to have a different value statement when you consider an executive is probably going to have far more training, probably going to have far more invested in that person. And that's why you would be incentivized to retain that person. You would be incentivized to restore that pay. And back to Josh D. Morrow's and Ken Park's statement, each one of them said executives. Executives will be hurt by this too. They will be just let go.
Wow.
That there will be attrition on that level. Don't get it twisted. This is not just cast members. Executives will be let go. But for the ones that need to be retained, the Disney company feels that they need to be incentivized to stay. And that's what you're seeing right now. And honestly, this was a problem even before all this. One of the big problems was what they call institutional memory.
Okay.
And what that is we've seen this. I can't bring in a specific example, but do you notice that Disney company will sometimes make mistakes that they made like 10 years ago or 5 years ago? And it's like, didn't you already learn this lesson? That's called institutional memory, where there's simply not people there that remember they did this before and it failed. And that's why sometimes they'll make mistakes over and over, because there just simply aren't people there to remember why this was an issue, why the problems that they encountered were problems to begin with. And so, and unfortunately, Disney made a lot of short-term decisions that maybe boosted profits for the quarter or for the year that executives won't simply have to live with the consequences of, because it just won't be there long enough. And honestly, this speaks to a larger issue with the Disney company as it has been ran for the last 30 years or so. because back in the Card Walker days and before that, back when they were more of a family company, not the media empire that they are today, they were very much, when it came to the parks, value focused. I mean, Card Walker famously, he just refused to even accept the possibility that they increase prices or ticket entry for the theme parks. Just didn't even consider it. And for the longest time, I think it was like a quarter to park. And this goes back to the philosophy, right? This goes back to Walt's philosophy when it came to the parking situation at Disneyland specifically. It was like a quarter for like 30 years or something. It was insane. And why was it that low? It was because, look, Walt Disney felt, look, this is not where we make our money. We maintain with the money that we bring into the parking lot, but this is not a profit center for us. We're not going to nickel and dime everybody. We're going to try to keep these prices as low as possible. And even back then, he was criticized for some of the nickel and diming that was going on. Now it's like, that's cute. But Card Walker maintained that philosophy going forward. And he was very much like, look, we want a value-driven philosophy. We have to. Card Walker's thing was, we want to run our parks in a way that gets people to, that gives the impression that we are of value to go on vacation to. Like, this is a value to go here for people. And it was very much value-oriented. That's changed completely to more of a profit-oriented model in terms of from the executive's perspective. But that was very much what happened. And then when the Bass Brothers, when the whole thing happened in the 1980s with Michael Eisner and the green mailing that happened and the Bass Brothers being the angel investors that came in, one of the economic reports that was typed up was the theme parks in terms of revenue generating from them could be significantly increased. And one of those was ticket entry. That was like one of the things that they noted was like the cost of entry severely under what it should be, what the valuation should muster. There was also a couple of other things that had to make Epcot a profitable. One of the things was, interestingly, was the resorts. It was underbuilt. They felt that more hotels and resorts could be built. Why do you think Michael Eisner, as soon as he walks in, he's like, right, we got to expand resorts? Like, a lot of that was because of some of the market research they had done for the company back in the early 80s. And make no mistake, as soon as Michael Eisner steps on board, that's where the theme park prices go up. So, they just start to staircase up. And then when Paul Pressler gets involved into the Disneyland Resort, I mean, just all bets are off. It just explodes. I mean, yeah. I still have annual passes that you look at the price, it's like, whoa, it's like a fraction of what it is now. Why do you think? Because you're trying to maximize profit. And while it might work in the short term, we're now starting to feel like, ooh, when you decrease the value of the parks to the extent that they have, when there is no nighttime entertainment, when there is no theme park entertainment to speak of, like parades and shows and stuff like that, when all these what people perceive as value get reduced, do you still charge the same? And that's really a question right now. Yeah,
it's a question. I mean, it's an issue for Disney because they're kind of in a situation where they're damned if they do, damned if they don't.
Yeah.
Because if they just keep the same price with the lesser experience like we have now, then like people say, well, it's not worth it. I'm not going to spend that. But then on the other hand, if you acknowledge, as Disney would acknowledge, like, oh, well, it's a lesser experience, so we're going to charge less. You kind of hurt your brand too, because you're acknowledging, well, we're not 100% premium like we've always been.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a tough call to make, definitely.
It absolutely is. And that's where the conversations usually go. It's like, well, do we reduce the price? It's like, well, do we have discounts? Maybe. And that's the other thing too, going back to Disneyland, the annual passes, it's like what they did before was try to get people off annual passes or higher tiers or whatever. And now it's like, you might really require annual pass holder visitation. What do you do both out in Disneyland and California? I'm sorry, Disneyland, California, and Walt Disney World, Florida. What do you do to re-incentivize that again, because there are people dropping off before all this. That's the way the company was going, where they were reducing perks and charging more for largely the same product. And now that's all changed. So I think really what you're going to see going forward is really, what should I say, a revitalization of that philosophy of like annual pass holders are more, they're our premium customer base, and so we should be doing things to really, I'm looking for a word and I can't find it. We should really be incentivizing that to really build up the base and to keep people coming back as much as possible. We'll see.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And one thing also that I found really interesting was this whole notion of Bob Iger. I'm also trying to find the words for this. Bob Iger is really trying to it seems like they're trying to reinvent the annual pass is what I'm trying to say. And like what you mentioned, how they're trying to incentivize and what have you. But what are they going to do now with leadership, Bob Iger and Bob Chapek, in terms of like, are they gonna reduce prices, you think? Or you think what approach do you think? Because you mentioned incentivization. What do you think they're gonna do to get those annual pass holders to get back in these gates and to really incentivize them? What is the approach going forward now to do that?
Well, I think, because the only frame of reference we have for anything like this actually taking place, and usually that's the issue with theme parks, right? The theme parks were supposed to be something that was very investment safe, that it was supposed to be very economically resistant, where economic times might be down, might be bad, but people will always want to go on vacation. People will always want to go to the theme parks to escape. So now it's like, wow, they're taken out completely. And so now I think it's very much a valuation assessment. It's very much like, okay, do we get away with charging necessarily the same price for what we have now? I think you can, but you really have to be careful. And I think Disneyland in the short term won't have problems getting visitation. But how do we turn into a long-term success? Well, I think you're going to see increasing discounts in specials. So I think you remember before, I think Rise of the Resistance opened, there was a special where if you, like an annual pass holder brought a friend, you could get a significant discount for that friend's ticket. Do you remember that promotion?
I do.
I think we're going to see more of those kinds of promotions to promote and enhance visitation. And it's going to be tough sledding. I think Disneyland's problem really is just going to be the capacity restraints initially.
Yeah.
And building back up the base. But Florida, that's a different animal, because for where it is, it's just completely overbuilt. I mean, there's no getting around it. It is just overbuilt for the economic circumstances as they exist.
And you know what, Dre, not to interrupt you, but I want to bring up this point. A lot of people mention the fact that, Florida needs a fifth park, right? They need a fifth park, fifth park. And I keep making the argument, and maybe I'm completely off base here, and I'm not, I don't have an MBA, just for the record. I don't have economic experience, but from what I can see, just as from a layman's perspective, right?
Yeah.
Disney World is already a week-long endeavor. You have 4 parks, water parks, you got multiple resorts. The average family is already spending a week in Walt Disney World, right?
Likely, yes.
Likely, rough, give or take.
Yeah.
How much more time, realistically, can the average family take off of work, right? That's a big deal. And spend, expendable income. Can they actually give to expand that into more time spent at Disney World? I think it's far less than Disneyland. I think it's easier growth-wise to add a third park to Disneyland I think you'd get more out of that
Absolutely.
than you would adding a fifth gate, because you can always add.
Mhm.
Disneyland Resort right now is only like a 2-day stay, really. It's a park a day. You can
Yeah.
add a third day, and families can afford it. It's reasonable. You can get an extra day off of work. It's not it's not out, it's not beyond the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
A lot easier than getting 8 days off to do 5 parks, 2 water parks, multiple. It just seems like there's more growth potential at Disneyland. Am I wrong?
No, I don't think you're wrong at all. They wanted to. There is a room in Imagineering right now, all where it's just dedicated to the third gate at Disneyland. That's all it exists for, is just potential ideas for a third gate. They've wanted a third gate for forever out in Disneyland. I mean, that is where they're going eventually. There are barriers to entry, though. Obviously, it's like, okay, well, we have to convert. It's probably going to be the Toy Story lot. We have to convert that. We have to make up for that parking. There are barriers to entry. I think Bob Iger felt it's like, okay, let's get Disney California Adventure shaped up first.
Right.
Let's finish investment in Disneyland, because there's still potential there, as crazy as it might seem. Everything north of the submarine voyage is like, okay, that's like prime real estate to do something there. Yeah. So that's the big parcel of land that they're like, ooh, like, what can we do here? Mickey Minnie's Runaway Railway's going in. I would agree with you that there is more to go. This phenomenon, by the way, this was encountered with the opening of Disney's Animal Kingdom, where they thought, okay, we're going to get one more day out of people. Didn't happen. What people end up doing was they took a day, or they just took out visitation completely of another park. Yeah. So instead of going 2 days Magic Kingdom, 2 days Epcot, 1 day Disney Hollywood Studios, just for an example. They just took 1 day off of the Magic Kingdom or Epcot, or didn't go to Disney Hollywood Studios, but they still stayed the same amount.
Right.
So it's definitely like you're getting to that barrier where just because you have a new theme park doesn't mean people get more vacation time to visit those things.
Yeah.
And that's why I think with Walt Disney World, it's very much, let's build up the theme parks that we have now.
Right.
Like, let's keep adding attractions to Disney's Animal Kingdom, Disney's Hollywood Studios. Let's fill out Epcot and Magic Kingdom. Like, let's keep investing in the theme parks we already have, because in terms of the investment, the return on investment, it's just, for how much you have to do to get another theme park up, it just doesn't make sense in even the short term.
Now, let me ask you this. Do you think, because now we live in a whole new world, whole new world. I'm on brand today.
Yeah, I know, right?
Now that we live in a whole new world, do you see the possibility of Disney? Because right now Disney is very focused on Walt Disney World being a multiple day experience. Do you see a day now where possibly Disney changes that focus and tries to turn Walt Disney World into more of a Disneyland style park, where they focus and really try to push that annual pass holder local base to drive that as sort of a barrier, like a cushion, so to speak, to prevent things like this going on? Because, like, really, whenever anything happens, whether it's 9/11, COVID, anything, and the tourism market, gets hurt, Florida takes a bigger beating. So I'm wondering, do you think Disney is going to take measures to sort of create more of a local fan base for Florida, like they have with Disneyland, to kind of cushion that a little bit going forward?
What we're seeing is a dramatic increase in Florida residents. It's quite interesting. What we're seeing with the lockdowns in some areas is it's forcing people to go to unlockdown areas. And so Florida is getting a whole bunch of people. I mean, just all kinds of property buys, all kinds of, the influx of people is very noteworthy. What's happening in Florida, from New York, from places that are like hard, North Carolina, Pennsylvania. And so, yes, I do believe there's going to be a refostering of the relationship between, local visitation for Walt Disney World, between Walt Disney World and locals. I think that's going to be that was the word I was looking for, a refostering of that relationship, right? You're going to be looking at, okay, the annual pass is going to be, maybe doesn't reduce its price, but it's going to be far more, the value will increase substantially, and there will be kind of a like, oh hey, ooh, this is really something I should get in on because there is so much value to it, right? And I think there will be a slowdown in the short term of just year-on-year increases when it comes to price, to try to help that local visitation, that local consumer, right? What's interesting, you talk about implications. One of the things that I just recently learned about was they're having a real hard time selling DVC points to places that they've just recently opened, like for example the what is it called? It's the Riviera Resort next to Epcot. They're having a real hard time filling that out with because that was like a DVC resort. That was kind of the mindset behind it, and they're just having a hard time filling it out. And I think you're going to have a monumental shift towards, okay, let's have a cushion like you speak of, a cushion for these economic hard times, these kind of crazy cataclysmic events that happen. Like let's be safer. And I think that's why you're going to have, with a lot of these like procedures that they've established for the COVID, for the post-COVID world, how much of that will be retained permanently is going to be an interesting thing to see play out. But I think for the procedures that they've established, trust me, they will have contingency plans going forward. Like a lot of this stuff, it's going to go in storage or whatever. They're going to have it. If this happens again, they'll be ready.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that I agree with you. I think, and we're going to talk about Disney Plus a little bit later, but the implications for this COVID thing, I think we're going to get back to normal life, but normal isn't going to be 100% like what we're used to. I mean,
maybe. I mean, I kind of have a different view on it. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how much going forward, how much they lift off, because it's just where they're at right now is completely unsustainable. I think we know that, but how much do they lift off and how much is permanent? I think it's going to be very interesting to see. Yeah,
I think it'll be similar to 9/11. I think how some things kind of stuck around.
Bag checks,
bag checks is a perfect example. I think we're going to see something like, when I say new normal, I mean stuff like that, where you kind of there's remnants of that situation. I think we're going to see, like, maybe the temperature checks, stick around for, like, it's not going to be overbearing like it is now, where, like you said, it is. I agree with you. It's unsustainable. But I think there's going to be remnants of that. Like, I think the sanitizer stations are going to stick around. Maybe the temp checks will stick around. Little things here and there, I think are going to be with us for probably forever.
Listen, if the sanitizer stations have to remain, or the sanitizer little machines, can we just get them themed? That's all I want. I just want them themed. Like, if they're going to be around, just theme them. Like, I don't necessarily mind it. But just theme them. Like, because right now you have like a sanitizer station in like the 21st century, like, placed literally within the Millennium Falcon. It's like, okay, I don't mind it being there, obviously, but and I think it's good for especially interactive items. But can we just theme it? Like, we need a theme.
I agree with you completely. At least get for Frontierland or something. Get like a wooden one, like it looks like wood, where it's a little bit less like jarring.
Yes. They're usually just on point with every single theme that they do. Like, for example, like the water fountains and Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. They're incredible. We just need them. I just need them themed. That's it. They can stay. That's fine. But please be less obtrusive and less a reminder of what we all went through.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Absolutely. I think if they're going to be permanent, theme them. Dress them up in, like, whatever land they're in, you know, make them look
Mm-hmm.
really out of this world when it comes to Galaxy's Edge or Tomorrowland. Give them a more wooden, natural look in Frontierland or Critter Country.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. They should do
Yes.
that. And really, there's no excuse for them not to do that because Disneyland has been closed for a very long time.
True. That's
You know?
true. You could find exterior shells you could just place on them. It's I think you made a good point. I think you
Yeah.
make a good point. You know, it's one thing. You know, it's very interesting with the security checks, right?
Yeah.
At first, it was very much like, ooh, like, do we necessarily want to? Because for Disney, it's like the first impression is you scanning your ticket, or at least that's what it was for, 50 years before that. And now it's the security checkpoint. That is your first impression that you get while on property. And
Right.
so they've tried to train up cast, regarding that a little bit better. Like, okay, we understand your security, but just be a little bit friendlier than maybe they were initially. Very, very much like, okay, action oriented. It's like, no, we need you to be softer. We need you, we can't have like, okay, get everything out and put it on the table. Like, let's go. It's like, okay, no, we can't have that. So just little things, just these little things that pop up. I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Now, one thing before we move on to Disney Plus, I wanted to bring up this, I call it a field trip, that Newsom's team.
Your video was great, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it. No, Newsom's little field trip to Florida to see what Walt Disney World was doing in regards to COVID. Now, this was just, I think it was reported like last week, and there's been a lot of talk that it happened that week or the week before, but whatever the case, this field trip occurred sometime in October.
Okay.
I think that's insane considering that, Florida opened in July. I don't know why it took Newsom's team so long to figure out what's going on, but what's your feelings on this? Where are you at with this, Dre?
At first, I was like, okay, this thing that's this complete unnecessary thing that's at taxpayer expense. It's like, okay, I guess it's all right that we're seeing movement on this, but I'm with you, man. It's just like, dude, this is nothing. This is a nothing burger. That they're just pushing it back. They're like, It's so unnecessary. It's like, oh my god. So, there have been a number of articles pushed out that suggest, that no outbreaks have happened in any theme park in the United States. And, most theme parks in the world, at least where record keeping is solid. There's just not been outbreaks. They're not vectors for transmission as it was once perceived back in March. And so, with these mitigation strategies implemented, you can be very, very safe. It's interesting. I note this in my thread. Alton Towers doesn't have a mask mandate, 100% mask mandate when you're outside. So as long as you're not in a queue and as long as you're not indoors, there is no mask mandate. So people just walk around, whatever, because they just understand that if it's so many times lower risk that you're outside, that it's just not a transmission vector in the way that maybe it is perceived in the United States. But it's like, and you make a great point, Burbank's right there. Like, it's Disney headquarters is in your backyard. Yeah. You can evaluate their procedures, whether you go to headquarters in Burbank or you actually go down there to the theme parks. You can evaluate there. This whole thing where it's just like, oh, but we're California, so we got to do things differently. This is ridiculous. Like, this is like completely mindless. It's like, wow, this just wastes time. People are suffering over there in Anaheim. It is a ghost town. Like, it's super scary. And that's why you see the Disneyland rally out there. It's just people want their park open. They want their park open. And this whole thing where you're going to send out teams uselessly, even places outside of Florida aren't having problems. Texas, I think there are places in Texas, Michigan. There are a number of states that have theme parks. They're not having outbreaks. They're not having issues. And Disney is a top echelon of this whole thing. I mean, they are the gold standard when it comes to their implementation of policies and procedures. They've even updated where other theme parks have gone stagnant. They have a set of procedures and they've just kept it that way. Disney has been hard enforcement. They've relooked at it and they've gone with the immersion data. It's like, okay, we're going to have masks, but we can't have vents on them, and other things aren't going to have neck gaiters. So this whole thing is stupid. It's so stupid. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I just don't see the point in it, because number one, Bob Iger, who is still chairman of the Walt Disney, or executive chairman of the Walt Disney Company, was on Newsom's Economic Recovery Board for months. So, he was in constant communication with Governor Newsom about what they were or weren't going to do in regard to the parks reopening. That's the whole point of Iger being on the Economic Recovery Board in the first place.
That's a benefit for him being on there.
Exactly. And then now, so Newsom wants to send a team over to Florida. What are they going to learn? Oh, they're wearing masks. Oh, they're social distancing. They're everything that he already knows. Like, I don't understand what he can gain from this, other than to kick the can down the road.
And that's why I'm really it's just so upsetting, because he never once acknowledges the larger implications of the lockdowns. He never once understands that, hey, and it's not just Disneyland. Anaheim is completely shuttered. Like, all these businesses they're just going out of business. They're setting up shop. They're boarding up. They're taking off. They can't. Disneyland is the economic driver for that community and even extended community. I mean, there are not only just I think there are like 78,000 jobs attached to the Anaheim area, just specifically. I think the overall implication for the entire Southern California theme park market is 200,000 jobs that are either within the theme parks themselves or in the periphery. I mean, this is an economic nuclear bomb that just got set off. And it's like, we're in no shape of restoring any of these things. And it's like, why? This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. This is just pushing the can down the road even further. And it's like, why are you doing this? This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And it's heartbreaking. I mean, I just hear stories of people all the time, and anecdotal examples. It's super depressing. I mean, when I was typing up my thread that I just posted on my Twitter account, I had to stop multiple times because it was just simply depressing going over it. And Gavin Newsom fails to even acknowledge it. Yeah. He doesn't even acknowledge just the economic hardship that these people are going through. It's completely catastrophic. It's a horrible situation.
It's horrible, Dre, and it's tunnel vision. Like you said, it's absolute tunnel vision. We're going to stop coronavirus, whether it means we're going to have a Great Depression, or whether you're not going to go to the hospital to get your cancer treatment, or it's total tunnel vision at the expense of everything else. And I think it's detrimental. I really do. I think we need more balance.
It's absolutely detrimental. The World Health Organization even acknowledged it. They said lockdowns as a first strategy to mitigating spread, it should not be your first strategy. They clearly said it definitively. We do not advocate for lockdowns.
Wow.
Because the economic hardship, the economic devastation is too great. It's too great. It's kind of the cure can't be worse than the disease mentality. You're going to be doing so much damage. And I go into it, and I won't go into all of it, but things like, kids are heavily affected. And we understand now who's most at risk for this virus in terms of long-term implications, in terms of worse outcomes. We know that kids just simply aren't in the same way that adults and older ones are. But the drug use, the suicide rate, even Dr. Redfield of the CDC said we're seeing far more people either induce physical harm on themselves or suicide than we ever are. It's just not even close to what the COVID outcome is. So you have to balance this out. And Gavin Newsom is just like, no. And now with you heard the proposed guidelines. It was like within 150 miles.
Yeah.
And you had to be yellow for like forever. And it's like that. You can't do that. I mean, you can't. You just can't have that. You cannot have that. And if you're saying that you can't be open until yellow. Well, do we have to close if we don't stay yellow? That's the other thing too. These theme parks are not light switches. They have to be open. You just can't have a theme park operation like Disney does on the scale they do and not have at least insurance that you're going to be able to stay open. Remember, Bob Iger closed voluntarily for that reason and others.
Right.
But then the 150-mile limitation, that doesn't help out the hotel proprietors in the area. That doesn't help the larger tourism spots in the area. It's mind-numbing. It's absolutely mind-numbing. And he has no sense of reference whatsoever with what's going on. It's crazy.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And what he wants is basically like an economic flex alert system where he can basically turn on and off the economy at a whim. Okay, we're this or that. Now we got to turn off the economy, shut everything down. Okay, now we're good. We can turn it back on. And I think that's detrimental. I really do. I think that we're going down a really, really slippery slope with that. And I think I completely back Disney in regards to not agreeing to that scenario, because that would be a disaster.
It's hugely detrimental. Understand the reason why we did the lockdowns in general. It was to preserve the healthcare system that clearly has not been overwhelmed in any way, shape, or form in any of these states, especially Florida and California. They've had scares, but they haven't been overwhelmed. And so it's like, okay, if you're going to make a contingent on infection rate and not factor in at all who's being infected, who's most at risk for going in the hospital, who's, which communities are most at risk for overwhelming hospitalizations, it doesn't make any sense. And that's why you're seeing a fundamental difference between how Ron DeSantis is doing out in Florida and Gavin Newsom in California. I mean, right. And people are like, well, we're going on Gavin Newsom. We're being unfair to him. Understand something, people. He wanted this power and responsibility. He didn't defer it at all. Ron DeSantis at least said, okay, I'm going to leave it up to the mayors of these places or these community leaders, and they'll establish their own guidelines for what they feel is best for their community because they're most in tune with it. You just send it to my office. I'll review it myself, sign off or not. Right? He deferred a lot of that to the local leaders. This is why you have the reopen OC now thing happening with the local leaders of, the Anaheim, the mayor of Garden Grove, Anaheim, and Buena Park. I believe it's where Knott's Berry Farm is. It's like, just give us the guidelines. They have no input or no say whatsoever.
Wow.
Gavin Newsom, at any time, he could have deferred these things. I understand that California's going through a lot right now. Right. I get that. I note that in the in my thread here. But understand that he could have deferred this to the local leaders in the areas. He could have deferred these responsibilities. No, he said he was firm. I'm going to hold this power. And so who do we have to blame?
Right.
The person that unilaterally took all the responsibility that could have been had.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. If you want to be king, then you got to deal with whatever comes, then
that's it. I'm sorry. I give no quarter.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's absolutely ridiculous. And, I'm just not seeing, and I'm going to link actually below your thread that you did on Twitter because it was phenomenal. So everyone check it out. I'm going to link it in the description below. But you do a great job as always, Dre, with breaking things down, in regards to all of this. So I'll link that below. I want everyone to check that out.
Well, like I said, I work really hard on it. There's some days where I worked like 10 hours on it. My computer actually crashed because of how many tabs and how many things I had open. So I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit from the parks. We're going to go now to the Disney Plus studio side of things. Disney announced, I think it was last week. I don't know. All the days blend together now, but
yeah, I know.
But I think it was last week where Disney Plus is going to be the priority for the foreseeable future. So they're going to start working and creating content for their Disney Plus service. Now, this doesn't mean necessarily that they're gonna they're not gonna ever make a movie again in theaters. This is just more from what I gather, and I could be wrong, but from what I gather, it's more or less just right now because of the uncertainty they're gonna focus on Disney Plus. What are your thoughts on this move?
Well, we have to look at all the things that are interconnected with this, right? All the things that are intertwined. So, Disney Plus, as originally envisioned, was the future, right? It was the future for the Disney company, but it was very long term. It was very much long range. It was like, okay, well, this will be a big aspect of our company going forward, but for right now, we're going to stick with the tried and true and all that. Once COVID happened, that changed the game. But one of the things that was the kind of like overarching principle with how Disney Plus was implemented at first was how it was priced was very much not priced for profitability. It was priced for market capture. So they understood that with all the streaming services that are available, nobody's going to want the 20 streaming services. This doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
You're really going to have a few players in the game as we move forward here. And all the other ones are just going to be consolidated. So Disney wanted to be one of the main players at the end. And so what they did was they priced Disney Plus to really capture that market initially, and then raise the prices as time goes on. But
Right.
That's another story. So that got completely skewed with COVID. I mean, that, when everything closed out, Disney Plus took on just a re-envisioned significance for the Disney company at large. And that's why, you had the streaming, you had their what is it? What do they call it? What is it? People subscribers went up through the roof. It just turned into a different vehicle altogether for them, and really the only one that's really being at all profitable. So now it's okay. How do we didn't initially price it to be profitable, but how do we maximize profit as much as possible? And that's where the Mulan thing came in. It's like, okay, well, can this be? Can we put out content that we usually have for the theaters on here? How profitable will it be? I think they were looking at Trolls and went, okay, well, maybe it's going to be, maybe it can work. Turns out that maybe not so much for Mulan. But hey, look, here's the thing with it. Whatever money it made, they pretty much absorbed all of it. They didn't have to split it with the theater owners. They didn't have to, as it gets percolate back to them, get whatever residual, dividends there are or whatever. It was just complete profit. So obviously, can we make this work? If we remember, when Bob Chapek was placed in the role of Disney Parks and Resorts initially, one of his first moves, because he came from consumer products, was to re-envision Disney Parks and merge it with consumer products and make it kind of its own division, right? So we had, from Disney Parks and Resorts, we had now Disney Parks Experiences and Products. That's the division as it has become known. And that was because of that merging. We're seeing that again, but with the Disney Plus division, our side of things. Yeah. So instead of having separate divisions for the various studios, for like TV, it now becomes far more consolidated and far more streamlined. I think that we actually touched on this, that things like this were going to happen back in April when we first did our analysis. And now we're seeing that play out, and with a Bob Chapek touch. So one of the scenarios is like, okay, well, if they have a special featurette on TV, that usually would be limited to TV. Now, maybe could we have a simultaneous broadcast of those items, both on Disney Plus and TV together? That's one of the things that you're going to start seeing. Can we have multiple distribution platforms? If you see something on TV, can you then see it immediately on Disney Plus? Those are the kind of things that we're going to see. And of course, maybe we're going to get maybe a new crossover with the premium experiences, like the Disney live action studio releases and Disney Plus.
Yeah, and one thing, I have a lot to say on this subject, but I think
go ahead.
One thing that I think I've seen a lot of dialogue on social media about Mulan underperformed, right? So that's sort of a referendum, so to speak, on the premium access model, like charging an extra on top of the subscription, right? And I really I kind of have to push back on that a little bit, at least right now.
I would too.
Yeah, because I think Mulan I don't know. See, I feel like the lack of sales they did for the Mulan Premier Access was more of a Mulan problem than it was a Premier Access problem. Like if you would have put Black Widow Premier Access on Disney Plus, it would destroy. It would destroy. I think Mulan was a troubled situation from the get-go. I think even if you put Mulan in theaters, it was real iffy because of the political issues with the actress and her viewpoints. A lot of people were turned off by that. And there was a lot of stuff going on with Mulan. I think
there was.
Yeah, if you would have had more of a safer bet, like a Black Widow or something like that, you would have seen it sky high. So I think Disney shouldn't give up yet on Premier Access. I think 2 or 3 more films kind of get a feel for it. I just feel like this one example might not 100% tell the story about Premier Access. It might be more indicative of what people were feeling about Mulan. And then in terms of the long term, I think that this was always kind of like the goal. I think like you touched upon it. Like they really wanted to do more of a direct to consumer, relationship. And I think that this COVID situation really pushed that forward. It expedited it. And I don't think the theater experience, I still don't think the theater experience is going away completely, but it will definitely be a smaller piece of the overall pie that studios use for profit, in terms of these films. I think before the theater experience was the gorilla in the room, right? The elephant in the room. That's where the studios made a bulk of their money. I think that's going to really, really shrink. It won't go away completely, like I said, but it will be a smaller portion of that pie. They're going to do more direct-to-consumer stuff, more streaming, video on demand. And they really want to kind of break away a little bit from that theater relationship, because you also mentioned they have to share some of those profits with those theater chains. Well, and I think they just kind of want to, they don't want to completely cut that relationship off, but they definitely want to cushion themselves, because if something like this happens again in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, they don't want to have another scenario where they're like bleeding out because people can't go to the theaters. You know what I'm saying?
No, absolutely. This is the great accelerator. So we talked about it before in previous discussions. Whatever the plan was in 50 years, 100 years, that has been expedited to a degree incalculable. So and I think you're right. You're going to see a kind of a re-envisioning of the market, a market correction, so to speak, where it's not going to be front loaded to the extent that it was for distribution in movies and theaters. And I think, if you're a theater exhibitor, you should be very concerned about that for sure. But it's kind of how it was going before, and it's really going now, and that's kind of a reality of the market. And that's why the AMC capitulated and adjusted their windowing practices with Universal to get, to restore that relationship. By the way, the whole AMC thing, people thinking that Disney's going to, no, that's not going to happen. That's just, no. It's just that.
Oh, you mean Disney buying AMC?
Yeah. You've heard that before. It's not going to happen. It's, guys, they're very much in debt. They're not going to take on another failing entity. If they can make it work. So it's you're going to see that shift a little bit. I very much firmly believe that. In terms of Mulan, like you said, that has its own problems. Even before all this, I even before all this, I said, "Hey, do you want to see Mulan?" And they said no, because it's not going to have Mushu. It's not going to have a couple of other notable things. It's like, okay, well, that makes sense.
Oh, by the way,
Soul. Oh, God.
I don't want to interrupt you. I mean, I'm sorry, but I just wanted to ask you, because last time we had a collabo, you haven't seen it yet. Did you end up seeing Mulan?
No, I still didn't see it. I'm sorry.
I'm just curious.
I have failed. I'm sorry. I failed in seeing it. No, I haven't. It's just I've been so busy. I really do apologize, sir.
No worries. I was just curious if you. I just wanted to get your thoughts on it if you happen to see it yet. But
see, this is why they're going to try other things out. You see, this is how it goes. But Soul's coming, right? I think Soul. They just announced that it was going to be released on Disney Plus. I believe included That's going to be an interesting thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think what you're going to see is I think the premium model is not dead yet.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely like, okay, maybe you have to adjust the price of how much you're charging premium. Maybe it really is genre based, like you said, like a Black Widow is a whole different thing than Mulan, and so maybe you have to be far more choosy with your films. Maybe you have to adjust the price per film. We've talked about that, I think, a little bit on here. I think we have, where it's instead of with theaters having just a one size fits all price for all of their movies, maybe you adjust the price based on how much budget that movie was thrown, that kind of thing. And I think you're going to see the price be adjusted a little bit for the monthly subscription price of Disney Plus, adjusted a bit to factor in premium content like Soul, a Black Widow, and so forth.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that might be the way to go, and just kind of adjust that premium access model and sort of play with it a little bit. I think it's just far too early to declare it dead after one get go.
It's not done yet. It's not done yet. Trust me. And especially, it's like, okay, they just released Tenet. That did not do very well at all. So trust me, the premium distribution model, that's not done yet. And part of this corporate restructuring that you're seeing regarding Disney Plus and their streaming services is going to be part of that, I think.
Now, I have an interesting question to ask you, because I'm a big fan of John Campea. I watch Campea all the time, and he had his friend on Barnett, Robert Barnett, and they were talking about the Disney Plus priority stuff, and it was very interesting. They brought up an interesting point. And they said that this model of focusing on streaming kind of threatens the creative quality, right? Because in their whole kind of justification was where when you release a movie into theaters, the return on that movie is solely based on the movie, right? So if you release, Avengers Endgame in the theater, the return is based on that film and that film alone.
Yeah.
Whereas if you were to drop, let's say, Endgame, just as an example, directly onto a streaming service, it's more about the overall streaming service, the package.
Yes.
Not so much about Endgame. That's more. Endgame becomes a piece of that overall Disney Plus package. So John Campea was saying, and his concern, I think it was valid. He was saying that that model sort of lends itself to Disney sort of doing it as cheap as they can.
Yeah. You're talking about maximizing profitability.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. That is a clear point. One I've actually thought of separately. I didn't even know that Collider actually did a segment on it. That's something that I've thought of myself a lot, because if you cannot get the same amount of profit, you have to do the things where you adjust to make up for that loss, and you have to price it accordingly, right? And then I think that's why we say that premium model's not dead yet. But the problem that is inherent is, okay, how do you stop people from viewing it multiple times? Again, if the theater-based model, you could charge per viewing,
right, and per person,
right? And you can't really do that with Disney Plus. Yeah. So, do you factor that in, not just in terms of the pricing structure for the overall product, but also the budget that product receives? Also, you do different things based on where you're putting it. So, Mandalorian is different than a Rogue One, for example, right? And you budget for an entire season, and you have a length for an entire season versus a 2-hour film. So that these become huge factors and implications when it comes to, like you said, content quality and what you can do with some of this stuff. And I think that's why theaters aren't going away, at Jump Street, but there is going to have to be a recalibration here. It's going to be interesting to see, because we have a certain expectation. And, in a post-Endgame world, like you say, we have an expectation for quality. Does that get, do we shake that up a bit? How do we factor all these things in. I think it's a very interesting conversation.
Yeah. And one last thing before we take off, but like in terms of the $1 billion film, like we've seen a lot of them. I mean, Endgame did what, $3 billion, and there's been a lot of movies. I mean, that have done $1 billion. You know, many of the Marvel movies, the Captain Marvel, a ton, a bunch of the Star Wars movies have hit over $1 billion. Are the days of the $1 billion movie kind of over for now, for the foreseeable future, in your opinion?
If this problem is not alleviated soon, there simply will not be a distribution apparatus available left to get to the $1 billion numbers that you talk about. And again, AMC is really struggling right now. They're going to need some. They're going to need a bailout of some kind, whether that be angel investment or getting bought out or something to stay afloat. You heard about I believe the Royal Theaters, or that theater chain back east. They're saying they're reclosing up and stuff. So a lot of it is based on just how many screens are available in the United States to capture, or in these various markets to capture as many people as possible, and to generate those to generate those gains. Again, part of releasing a film is what's the widespread distribution? Like, what date does it hit wide? How many screens is this showing on? And without those screens, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
it's really hard to say. I mean, it's so unpredictable.
It's so unpredictable. This is definitely a new dawn for the theater industry. Yeah. A lot of evolution, a lot of adaptation, a lot of, I think they're going to come out of it, but I think that the movie industry is going to look a lot different in 4 or 5 years for sure.
I think it is. And what you're seeing right now on the Disney Plus side, and that goes back to our original conversation about the theme parks, you're seeing that recalibration, that adaptation take place. And sometimes it manifests itself in ways that maybe not make us super comfortable or doesn't make it easy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, Dre, as always, brother, it's been a pleasure, man. I always love having you on. I'm going to have you on again very soon. I love having you on always. Before we go, any final thoughts or anything you want to bring up or anything you want to discuss?
Open Disneyland. That's all I want. I open Disneyland, and it's not just for me. Look, I live in Arizona. I'm not going for months, even.
Yeah.
It's not for me. It's for the cast members. It's for the people that rely on these places. It's for the people that really this is part of their community. Open up. I mean, this is foolish. This, we all know. We talked about it. This is foolish. Open up Disneyland.
Yeah.
That's my word.
100%. Preach it, brother. And I'm in the same boat as you. Like, I've been to Disneyland, like probably 1,000 times or more. I don't even know at this point, but I can live without it. I can live without it for the foreseeable future. I'm not going to die if I don't go for another month or two. But the thing that bothers me the most, like you, number one, the cast members, the people that depend on it, and even the not cast members, people that are surviving off of Disneyland that aren't directly employed by Disney, like the surrounding hotels, the restaurants, those people. Let's open it up for those people.
Absolutely.
And then also just for the company that we care about so much, I want to see it. I want to see this place that we love, and I want to see this company that we love, thrive. And I just feel like opening the park is on. I want to see it get back on the path of recovery.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. Look, this company has been around for almost 100 years now, coming up in 2023. Everything that they're doing right now, understand the changes that are happening, understand that even the layoffs are all to ensure that 100 years continues. I understand it's extremely hard right now, and the layoffs are, trust me, they affected a lot of people, but the only way we're going to get that back is with a corporate structure, with the executive base that's making good decisions for the long term, and we have to factor that into the equation. But that's helped out a lot by this not being open. So let's get it open.
Let's get it open. Now, before we go, Dre, if you can let everybody know where they can find you on social media.
Best way to find me is on Twitter at VashSky. That's V as in Victor, V as in Victor, ASHSKY. VashSky. It's the best place to find me.
Perfect. Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate coming on, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll see you later. Thank you, sir.
Great. Take care, bud. Bye-bye.
Bye.